"You can take her now." My father said it on the porch camera. My mother held Grandma Margaret's arm. 2 suitcases sat by the door. Then they turned around and left. They left my 80-year-old grandmother outside my house before sunrise. She wore thin pajamas, an old cardigan, and house shoes. The cold was hard enough to burn my chest when I opened the door. They had not knocked. They had not called. I called my mother first. No answer. Then the text came. "Grandma is at your house. Daniel needs space to work. We know you'll understand." That was the damage in one line. Not help, not panic, not a request. They had decided for me and for her and expected me to absorb it. I called a cousin because I wanted one sane voice. She listened, then said, "I don't want to get in the middle." That was when I understood it. They had not left Grandma at my house. They had left her with me because they knew no one else would interfere. If you have ever heard "we knew you'd understand," stay with me. I got Grandma inside and shut the door. Her hands were ice cold. Her lips were pale. She looked up at me and asked, "Did I do something wrong? I am a nurse." That part of me moved before the rest of me did. Blankets, warm drinks, blood pressure cuff, thermometer, pulse check. Questions later. Her temperature was low. Her blood pressure was far too high. Her tremor was worse than when I had seen her last. She looked smaller, too. Not just older, reduced. I helped her sit on the couch and brought in the suitcases. One held clothes. The other held what was supposed to be her care. Adult briefs, a broken brush, loose pill bottles, insulin pens, plastic bags stuffed with labels and receipts. I sat on the floor and started sorting everything. 2 pill bottles had wrong doses written in marker. 1 insulin pen was expired. A pill organizer had morning medications in the evening slots. Another was half empty. Nothing was arranged like a safe home setup. It looked like survival by neglect. Grandma watched me quietly. She looked embarrassed. That bothered me more than the mess. She was the one left outside. Still, she looked ashamed to be seen. I asked when she had last eaten. She said, "Yesterday, I think." I asked about insulin. She said, "Sometimes they forgot." Then she added, "Please don't make trouble." That sentence was older than that morning. Please don't make trouble. Please don't upset your father. Please don't embarrass the family. Please don't say what everyone can already see. I called work and took emergency leave. My manager heard my voice and did not question it. I was grateful. I had no room left for performance. Then I opened the side pocket of the larger suitcase. Inside was a sheet of paper in my mother's handwriting. Not a care plan. Not emergency contacts. A cost list. Pads. Copays. Laundry. Transport. Special meals. Unnecessary extra supervision. At the bottom she had written, "This is becoming unsustainable." I stared at it for a long time. My parents had spent years saying Grandma was difficult. That care was exhausting. That Daniel was helping. That I did not understand because I worked too much. But numbers do not sigh. Numbers show decisions. And that still was not the worst part. When I helped Grandma change, I found pressure sores on her lower back and thigh. Not catastrophic. Still real. Still preventable. Still old enough to tell me this had not started that morning. I asked how often she had been helped out of bed. She said, "I tried not to ask too much." That answer told me everything I needed. I took photos. I documented her vitals. I wrote down the time. I saved the doorbell footage. I printed my mother's text. My hands stayed steady. That scared me. It meant I was already past shock. Then Grandma said, "Your father told me not to tell you about the doctor." I turned around. "What doctor?" She twisted the blanket in her hands. "He said I kept canceling. He said I didn't want more appointments." I asked if that was true. She shook her head, very slowly. Then she whispered, "I never said that." By noon, I had called her clinic. By afternoon, I had enough to know this had been going on for months. Appointments had been canceled more than once. The note each time was the same. Patient refused. Family aware. Grandma had not refused. She had been refused. Snow started falling outside while I sat at the kitchen table with those records. Grandma slept under 2 blankets in the next room. My mother sent another message. Please don't make this dramatic. We all did our best. I did not answer. That sentence had carried my family through every selfish act they wanted blurred. We all did our best, as if effort mattered more than harm. That evening, I made soup and toast. Grandma held the spoon with both hands. I watched her try not to spill and thought about how often I had accepted my parents' version of events because peace was easier. Grandma asked if she could stay one night, as if she were visiting, as if she had not been abandoned. I told her, "You're staying here." She nodded, but not with relief, with disbelief. That was the first break, not between me and my parents. That break was old. The new one was inside me. I stopped looking for a gentle explanation. Before bed, I watched the camera footage again. My father lifted the suitcases. My mother steadied Grandma. Neither of them turned back. At the very end, with the car door open, my mother said one sentence. "She'll handle it." She was right. Just not the way she meant. If someone ever handed you the damage and called it love, stay with me. The next morning, I made a list. Doctor, pharmacy, bank, adult protective services, photographs to label, medication errors to verify, dates to match. But under all of that was one old question. Was I overreacting? My parents had trained that question into me. Not with lectures, with tone, with sighs, with little looks across rooms. Daniel would create a problem. I would name it. They would act as if naming it was the offense. Grandma woke late. I helped her wash and eat. She apologized 3 times before breakfast. For the trouble, for the timing, for all this. I told her to stop. She apologized again. I asked how long she had been sleeping downstairs at my parents' house. She said she used to have a room. Then Daniel moved back after another business failed. After that, he needed quiet. Then he needed privacy. Then he needed space to work. He always needed something. That phrase was still on my phone. Daniel needs space to work. My mother had sent it as if that settled everything. As if a grown man's comfort outranked an old woman's safety. I called my father. He answered on the second ring. He did not ask how Grandma was. He asked why I had taken pictures. I asked how he knew. He said my mother had told him. Then he said, "Don't start building a case over a family misunderstanding." A family misunderstanding. Not concern. Not error. Not neglect. Misunderstanding. I told him Grandma arrived hypothermic, hypertensive, undermedicated, and with pressure sores. I told him the insulin had been mishandled. I told him appointments had been canceled. He let me finish. Then he said, "You always make everything sound clinical so you can feel superior." That was familiar. Facts from me were treated as arrogance. Chaos from Daniel was treated as need. I asked if he had canceled the appointments. He said, "She didn't want to go." I asked if she had signed anything. He said, "Don't interrogate me." Then he hung up. I documented the call. If you have ever been told facts are disrespectful, you know the feeling. By midday, I had spoken with the clinic again. A nurse there knew me by name. She stayed careful, but she said enough. The chart notes were concerning. I wrote that down too. Then I drove Grandma to an urgent appointment. Getting her into the car took longer than it should have. She was weaker than I had realized. The doctor examined her and went very still in that professional way that means the findings match the fear. Weight loss over 10 pounds. Poor glucose control. Skin breakdown. Worsened tremor. Medication mismanagement. Probable missed insulin doses. He asked who had been caring for her. Grandma looked at me first, then at the wall. Then she said, "My family." On the drive home, she asked if I was angry. I said yes. She nodded. Then she said, "Your mother said I was becoming expensive." She said it almost politely. That made it worse. At home, I checked Grandma's handbag. Inside were tissues, a bank card, old receipts, and a wallet. I asked if she still handled her money. She said, "Your father helps now." I asked when that started. She said she was not sure. We logged into her account together. The pattern was wrong almost immediately. Repeated transfers, thousands over months. Some labeled household management. Some labeled nothing at all. Several went to an account tied to Daniel's latest failed business. I printed everything. Money out. Care reduced. Appointments canceled. Daniel protected. I called my mother. She answered on the third ring and said, "Do not punish your brother because you resent him." There it was. Not harm. Not evidence. My resentment. I asked why Grandma's money had been transferred. She said bills had to be paid. I asked why Daniel's account received funds. She said he was handling business for the household. I asked what business. She said, "You don't understand pressure inside a family." Pressure. That word again. As if pressure explained leaving someone outside in winter. Then I asked, "Did Dad forge any documents?" Silence. Just long enough. Then she said, "Be very careful what you accuse your father of." Not no. Not impossible. Be careful. That afternoon, I found the paper in an envelope tucked inside Grandma's bag. Power of attorney. Supposedly signed by Grandma. The signature was wrong. Not slightly off. Wrong in the way imitation is wrong. I laid it beside an old birthday card she had written me. The difference was obvious even before anyone official touched it. And still part of me asked the same tired question. Could this be some misunderstanding? Could my parents be selfish without being deliberate? Could they have drifted into something terrible without naming it? Then I watched the camera footage again. My parents leaving her outside before sunrise. No real coat. No call. No knock. No hesitation. They had not lost control. They had used it. Daniel called that evening. He sounded irritated, not worried. He said Mom was upset. Dad was furious. I was humiliating the family. I asked if he had received Grandma's money. He said, "I've done everything for this family, and now you want receipts?" That was when the structure became clear. Daniel took. My parents explained. Everyone else adjusted. I asked where he had been that morning. He said he had a meeting. I asked if he knew Grandma was being left at my house. He paused, then said, "It was temporary." Temporary was his word for anything he wanted without accountability. I told him not to contact Grandma again. He laughed. Then he said, "You think writing things down makes you in charge." I ended the call. That night I completed the APS report. Photos, vitals, medical findings, canceled appointments, financial concerns, the text, the video, the suspected forgery. My finger stayed over submit for 1 second, not because the facts were weak, because I knew what would happen next. In families like mine, truth is called betrayal the moment it becomes permanent. Then Grandma woke in the recliner and called my name. Just my name. Small voice. Small room. That was enough. I submitted the report. Has anyone here ever wondered whether it was control or just concern? I did too. An hour later, my mother texted, "You are blowing this up beyond repair." I finally heard the real meaning. Not beyond repair for Grandma. Beyond repair for their cover. Once the report was filed, the family tone changed. My father stopped sounding offended and started sounding official. My mother became softer in writing and colder in person. Daniel got reckless. APS called the next morning. They asked clear questions. I gave clear answers. Dates, vitals, medication errors, transfers, suspected forged power of attorney, doorbell video. The worker asked if Grandma was safe with me. I said yes. For the first time since that porch, I felt certainty when saying it. The home visit happened the next day. I had expected Grandma to protect my parents. She was nervous, but she did not protect them. She sat in my living room in a clean sweater and gray slacks. Her hands shook around a mug of tea. The caseworker asked how she came to be at my house. Grandma said, "They brought me here." The worker asked if she agreed. Grandma said, "No." Then she added, "I was told Emily would understand." The worker documented her weight, medications, skin condition, and living arrangements. I handed over the suitcase note. The worker photographed it without comment. Professionals know when paper speaks loudly. That afternoon, my parents came to my door. I did not invite them in. My father looked past me anyway. My mother wore her church face, calm mouth, hard eyes. My father said, "This has gone far enough." I said, "Yes." He asked to see Grandma. I said, "No." He said, "You cannot keep a mother from her family." I said, "You left her outside." He flinched, but only in anger. Then he said, "Stop repeating that like we dumped an animal." My mother stepped in with her softer voice. "Emily, families make difficult arrangements." I told her APS had already opened a case. Her face changed before she could stop it. Not grief. Calculation. Then Daniel got out of the car and came up the path, coat open, face annoyed. "No shame." My father leaned toward me and said, "Do you understand what this will do to your brother? Not to Grandma. Not to them. To Daniel. If you have ever watched a family protect the wrong person, you know how quiet that moment feels." I said, "I understand exactly what he did." My mother whispered, "We were trying to keep things stable." Stable for whom? I did not ask. I knew. I told them there would be no private fix, no informal apology, and no access to Grandma without direction from the caseworker. My father called me cold. My mother called me unforgiving. Then Daniel finally spoke. "Tell them the transfers were for the business." I looked at him. He corrected himself. "For family expenses." I asked which expenses. He said he had carried everyone for months. That was absurd. He had failed one business after another while my parents framed him as promising. But the point was never accuracy. It was entitlement. My mother said, "Daniel has been under enormous pressure." Grandma heard enough from inside. She spoke from behind me, not loudly. "Daniel, you took my money." Everyone stopped. He turned toward her voice and smiled. Then he said, "Grandma, don't confuse yourself." That sentence still chills me, not because it was loud, because it was practiced. I moved into the doorway and told them to leave. My father said they would not be spoken to like criminals. I said, "Then stop acting like people hiding things." Daniel swore. My mother gasped, not at him, at me. The tone mattered more to her than the theft. They left angry, not ashamed, not frightened, only offended. After the car pulled away, Grandma sat down and shook harder. I thought it was fear. Then I realized it was effort. She had spent what strength she had on one sentence. I knelt beside her and asked if she wanted me to stop. The calls, the report, the case, everything. She looked at me for a long time. Then she said, "No, finish it." That was the point of no return. Not the report. Her words. Over the next week, everything sharpened. APS coordinated with law enforcement and financial review. Medical records were requested formally. Bank transfers were traced. The power of attorney drew immediate scrutiny. I did not have to persuade anyone. I only had to keep handing over what I had. My parents answered the way they always did. They called relatives. They described me as dramatic, unstable, proud, too career-minded, too harsh. Some relatives stopped returning messages. Some sent careful texts. "We love you both. I'm sure there are two sides." I hate seeing families torn apart. Then I would change Grandma's dressings, or sort her medications correctly, or hear her ask permission to use the bathroom in my own house, and abstract questions would lose their charm. One evening, she looked through an old photo album I had found in her suitcase. She touched a picture of my mother as a young woman and said, "She was not always like this." I believed her. That may be the saddest part. A week after the home visit, the investigator called with preliminary findings: elder abandonment, medical neglect, financial exploitation. 3 clean phrases for filthy behavior. I wrote them down and sat with them, not because I doubted them, because seeing those words attached to my family tilted the room. My mother sent one last plea that night. "Please talk to me before strangers define this family." I did not answer. Strangers had not defined my family. Actions had. The next morning, temporary restrictions were issued. No unsupervised access. No medical control. No financial control. Everything moved quickly once it was outside the house. Grandma gained 2 pounds over the next 10 days. Her blood sugar stabilized. Her face changed. Less fear. More attention. She asked for a sketchbook. I bought one on my way home. When I handed it to her, she smiled in a way I had not seen in years. Small, almost shy, as if joy needed permission too. That was when the last illusion fell away. Recovery was possible, which meant the neglect had been active, not inevitable. The hearing was not dramatic. That matters. People expect shouting. What I saw instead was structure. By then, the records were aligned. Transfers were documented. Medical findings were consistent. The suspected forged document had been reviewed. Statements had been taken. My notes mattered because I made them early and kept them clean. I wore a navy suit I used for hospital meetings. Not because clothes create truth, because I knew my family. If I looked tired, I would be called emotional. If I cried, I would be called theatrical. So I gave them nothing extra. Grandma wore a soft blue cardigan and held my arm. She was nervous. So was I. But nervous is not the same as uncertain. My parents sat together. Daniel sat one seat away. Even then, space formed around him. Protected, but not responsible. The findings were stated plainly. Elder abandonment, medical neglect, financial exploitation. There was testimony about the porch, the weather, the time, Grandma's condition on arrival, her weight loss, the pressure sores, the mishandled insulin, the canceled appointments marked as patient refusal, the bank transfers, the false authority used to control her money. My father's explanation was strain. My mother's was confusion. Daniel's was temporary borrowing. Together, their defense sounded less like a family and more like a committee avoiding one sentence. We did this on purpose. No one had to say it. My mother described me as always independent to the point of harshness. That was her old wound. My independence had always offended her because it could not be arranged. Then she said, "Emily never understood how much we carried." I looked at Grandma beside me and thought, no, I understand now. The court granted me legal guardianship. It did not feel like triumph. It felt heavy, necessary, final. Restraining orders followed. No contact, no access, no control. Not because I wanted revenge, because they had already shown what access meant. Outside, the air was bright and cold. Grandma held my arm tighter. She did not cry. Neither did I. Daniel called after us from the steps. "You've ruined all of us." I turned because old habits die slowly. Then I said, "No, I stopped helping you." It was the first time I had ever answered him that cleanly. My father said I was no daughter of his. He meant it as punishment. It sounded more like clarification. My mother looked at me as if I had failed some last test. Maybe I had. Their idea of loyalty had always required silence. I remember feeling calm for the first time in weeks. I took Grandma home. The consequences widened over the next months. I will not decorate them. My parents lost standing where reputation had mattered to them. Church circles shifted. Neighbors learned enough. Friends became cautious. Daniel's business excuses finally collapsed under scrutiny. People asked whether I was satisfied. That word never fit. Satisfied suggests appetite. I had none for this. What I wanted was simpler. Safety, distance, records that matched reality, a quiet home, no more lies. At last, a life for Grandma not organized around someone else's convenience. With guardianship in place, I reviewed every account, bill, and medical plan. The remaining money was less than it should have been, still enough to matter. Enough to ask a different question. What now? I knew one thing immediately. I would not keep her money for myself. That would repeat the logic I was trying to end. So the remaining funds were placed into an elder care trust. Every dollar had a purpose. Housing, medical support, mobility assistance, meals, programs, care with dignity. Care that did not depend on anyone performing sacrifice. I also set instructions for later. After Grandma died, any balance would go to organizations that fight elder abuse. That part felt obvious. The money had already been used to diminish her. The rest of it should protect someone. My mother learned about the trust and sent one message. "So, you really think you're better than us?" I did not answer. This was never about better. Only about stopping. That silence became my real boundary. Not speeches, not explanations. No more emotional labor handed to people who turned it into cover. Grandma moved into a better rhythm slowly. Breakfast at the same time. Medication managed correctly. Physical therapy. Neurology visits. A proper mattress. Warm clothes. A chair by the window. The first time she told me she was hungry between meals, I had to step into the hall. Wanting food should not feel like progress, but it did. She asked once whether she was the reason all of this happened. I told her no. Then I said the fuller truth. They were already doing it. I just stopped pretending it was normal. That seemed to settle inside her. I still asked myself hard questions. Had I destroyed my family? Could intervention have happened without exposure? Could I have protected Grandma and spared the name? Those questions visit people raised inside image management. We are taught the visible wound matters more than the hidden one. Then my mind would go back to the porch, the frost, the thin pajamas, the text. Daniel needs space to work, and the questions would end. A relative later passed along a message from my father. There would always be a place for me if I admitted I had overreacted. That was elegant in its cruelty. A family seat offered back in exchange for dishonesty. I declined with one word. No. There is power in a clean refusal. Not loud power. Just the kind that leaves no handle. If you have ever mistaken endurance for duty, I hope you stay with me here. By the end of that season, my parents and Daniel were outside the perimeter of my daily life. The consequence was clear. They lost access to Grandma. They lost her money. They lost the private shelter that had hidden what they were doing. I lost the last excuse to call us close. The house changed first in small ways. A blanket folded over Grandma's chair, fresh fruit on the counter, a medication tray organized by time, a watercolor set drying near the sink. About 6 weeks after the hearing, Grandma started a watercolor class at the senior center. I drove her there on Tuesdays. The room smelled faintly of paper and coffee. Most of the students were older women with steady hands and direct opinions. Grandma liked them immediately. She painted simple things at first. Apples, a blue cup, winter branches. Then one day she painted a red scarf hanging by a door. Small painting, plain subject. She kept looking at it as if it meant something private. If you have ever had to choose peace over family approval, you are not alone. Her health improved steadily. Not magically. Steadily. She gained weight. Her glucose readings became predictable. Her skin healed. Her tremor remained part of her, but not the whole room. Sometimes she laughed at terrible television outfits. The sound surprised both of us at first. The trust covered what she needed. Aides came during the right hours. Appointments stayed on calendar. Bills were transparent. Nothing was hidden because nothing needed hiding. That alone changed the air in the house. Sometimes she asked about my parents. Not often. Usually after a church bulletin arrived by mistake or a holiday commercial stirred old habits. I kept my answers short. They are not involved. That was enough. My own grief was quieter. I did not miss the chaos. I did not miss Daniel's demands, my father's certainty, or my mother's polished sentences. What I missed, sometimes, was the simple idea that parents protect the vulnerable by instinct. Losing that idea is not loud. It is like taking a picture from the wall and seeing the mark behind it. There were still people who wanted a softer story. One cousin said she wished I had found a private way through it. I told her there had been a private way. It was the porch. It was the canceled appointments. It was the forged signature. Private had already been tried. Spring came late that year. On the first warm day, I opened the windows and Grandma asked to sit outside. I wrapped a blanket around her legs and brought tea. She watched birds move along the fence and said, "I can think again." After that, she talked more. Not confessions. Fragments. How Daniel was praised for plans he never finished. How my mother kept saying the family could not survive another failure from him. How my father took the mail, then the accounts, then the appointments. How every loss was explained as temporary. How every sacrifice moved in one direction. I listened. I did not push. By then, the shape was clear. And still some people kept asking the same question. Were my parents cruel? Or only weak in the face of the sun they had built everything around? Was Daniel malicious? Or simply trained to think others would absorb his consequences? I know what the investigation found. I know what the records proved. I also know families can become systems before they become scandals. I leave that question with whoever is listening. What I know is simpler. They left an 80-year-old woman on my porch in winter. They reduced her care while taking her money. They expected gratitude for the cleanup. Everything after that came from those choices. Grandma lived long enough to enjoy the life they said was too burdensome to provide. That fact stays with me. The care was possible. The kindness was possible. The dignity was possible. They had chosen otherwise. In her final year, she painted more often. Not masterpieces. Postcards of ordinary things. A teacup. A glove. A church window. 3 pears in a bowl. I framed 2 and hung them in the hallway. She said that made her feel official. I told her she was. When her health finally declined for reasons no one caused, it was different. Doctors were involved. Comfort was prioritized. Information was clear. Choices were explained. Nothing was hidden behind family pride. Nothing was postponed for convenience. There is sorrow in a natural ending. There is also relief when the ending is not shaped by neglect. After she died, the house became very still, not empty. Still, I followed the trust instructions exactly. The remaining funds went where they were meant to go, toward elder care and the prevention of abuse. I signed the papers and felt no heroism, only completion. My parents and Daniel faced their own consequences by then. Legal consequences, financial collapse, lost reputation that no polished explanation could repair. I did not follow it closely. Distance does not always mean hatred. Sometimes it only means enough. The last message I ever received from my mother came months later. No apology, no acknowledgement, only this. I hope one day you remember we were your family. I read it once and set the phone down. Then I looked at the watercolor in my hallway. The red scarf by the door. What I remembered was more exact than what she wanted. I remembered the camera alert. I remembered Grandma asking if she had done something wrong. I remembered the cost list. I remembered the false signature. I remembered my father asking what this would do to Daniel. I remembered Grandma saying, "Finish it." So I did. I did not break my family. I refused to keep covering what they were doing. There is a difference. Now, when people ask where my boundaries came from, I do not soften the answer. They came from one winter morning when the truth was sitting outside my front door, shaking from the cold. That is the story. No twist left, no lesson wrapped up. Just this. I kept the house warm. I kept the records straight. I kept my grandmother safe. That was enough for me then. It still is. And I stopped calling cruelty by gentler names.